Hi there, welcome to Key to Pictures. Shooting modes. Which mode should I shoot in? Or which mode should you shoot in? So there are 4 main modes on your cameras, and you're going to find them here on the dial. On most cameras, I mean, that's where mine is. The first one is auto, and auto just means that the camera chooses everything. Chooses ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all of that. The next mode is aperture priority, and that means that the most important thing is the aperture, so you choose that, and the ISO. Your camera will choose the shutter speed. The next one is shutter speed priority, and that just means that you choose the shutter speed, that's the priority, and the ISO, and your camera chooses the aperture. And then the last one is manual, and that just means that you choose all of the settings: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. So let's talk quickly about shooting in auto. Basically, if you have a DSLR camera and you're just putting it in auto the whole time, it's almost a waste of money, just because you're not using your camera to its fullest capacity. It's almost as if you just had a point and shoot. So you might as well just buy a cheap point and shoot than invest in an SLR if you're just putting it on auto. Manual mode and the other modes I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Manual mode, you have full control over your camera. You tell it what you want your picture to look like. And it does take some time and some effort to get used to shooting in manual or the other ones, but you can do it. You just have to give it some practice. So with that said, I actually shoot in aperture priority, meaning I choose the aperture. And I also make sure that I have my camera set with the exposure compensation turned on. So basically what that means is my camera chooses the shutter speed initially, but I have the ability to override that and choose my own shutter speed. I can adjust the shutter speed. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You still have it in manual. You're able to choose all of your settings. However, your camera chooses that initial shutter speed. Remember, if you watch the manual, how to shoot a manual video, you have to set all your settings, your ISO and your aperture, and then you have to adjust your shutter speed so that dial in there is at the 0, and that means that you have a perfect exposure. Well, having it in aperture priority with the exposure compensation turned on, your camera does that first step for you. It automatically will keep that at 0 for you. So when you turn, if you're taking a picture outside of your kids here and they're running this way, and you turn here and there's more light flooding in, your camera's going to automatically switch that shutter speed for you, adjusting it for the light. And then, like I said, with that exposure and compensation mode turned on, you can take a look at that picture and see if you agree if that's the correct exposure or not. And if you don't, then you can adjust your shutter speed. So to turn your exposure compensation on, get out your camera manual and look up exposure compensation and follow the directions of how to turn that on. You're going to go in that menu and basically just turn it on. And then to use the exposure compensation, it's basically just using your camera as if it were in manual mode. On my camera, if you can see the top, this dial here adjusts my aperture, and this dial back here adjusts my shutter speed. So some people will only have one dial that they have to toggle back and forth. So when you're in exposure compensation, that one dial, if you don't touch anything and you move it, is going to adjust your aperture. To then use that same dial as adjusting your shutter speed, you're going to have to push a button. So oftentimes it will look like this. It's a little plus and a negative. So you'll have to push a button like that. It's usually back here with your thumb if you only have one dial, so it's easy to use. You'd have to push that button, and then this dial would then turn into your shutter speed dial. Like I said, on mine, I've got 2 dials, so I don't have to worry about that. On some people's camera, they have to change that dial, what that dial is intended for. So to learn how I shoot and going through the whole process of, to begin shooting, then make sure you watch the other video on that. But I do want to leave you with a quote. And the quote says, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion." And that was by Muhammad Ali. So it takes a little effort, but you're going to be happy in the end that you put forth the effort and became who you want to be. So I hope you make it a great day, and I'll see you soon.